the Chief Litigation DA's office. I'd like to welcome you to our Public Safety Town Hall. I'd like to start off by introducing our DA, Joe Gonzales. Joe D. Gonzales began serving as the Bexar County District Attorney on January 1st of 2019. Under his leadership, the 500-member office has been redirected to focus on prosecuting violent crime, domestic violence, and other victim crimes while bringing criminal justice reform to Bexar County. DA Gonzales has created new and innovative divisions and programs to the office, such as the Civil Rights Division, the Site and Release Program, and the new drug policy initiatives while continuing to protect our citizens. Joe was born in San Antonio and raised by his mother in a single-parent, modest household along with four other siblings. He attended this middle school. He attended St. Mary's University, where he earned a BA in political science, and then attended St. Mary's University School of Law and received a law degree there. Prior to being elected as criminal district attorney in 2018, Joe worked in both the Bexar County and Harris County DA's offices in the 90s, and then as a criminal defense attorney for 21 years. Joe has over 33 years in the practice of criminal law, having worked both sides as a prosecutor and a defense attorney. He's also a former magistrate judge, which he did for 7 years. Among the many community and civic groups Joe's involved with, he is a member of the Gonzales organization, whose mission is to provide scholarships to deserving students in the San Antonio area through the Rafael Consejo Educational Foundation. Joe Gonzales, our DA.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. It's an honor to be here once again. And let me just start off by saying that this is going to be an informal discussion on public safety. As I have been doing these talks and going out to the community for 4 years, it obviously is a concern of ours to make sure that we do everything to ensure your safety as members of the public. And let me also comment that this is where I grew up. You heard Christian say that I grew up in a modest house that was actually, I'm sure a lot of you had to drive by Kennedy High School to get here. Our home was across the street from Kennedy. And so this is the area I grew up in. This is the middle school that I went to. I was a band geek when I was in school, in middle school and high school, and I remember my first band concert over there. The stage wasn't here, it was over there. But I also have, just like I have fond memories of the school, I have some jarring experiences. We talk about the violence in our community. We talk about gun violence. And actually, you know that the first time I experienced gun violence was here on this campus 50 years ago. It was back in 1972 that our vice principal was shot. He survived a very serious injury, but we were all here. We all were whisked out of our buildings, and I remember that event like it happened yesterday. So gun violence has always been with us, and that's something obviously that's top of mind for myself and the other members of the panel that you'll hear from today. And you'll hear what we're doing to try and combat gun violence, other sorts of violent crime, and the initiatives that we've undertaken in the office. But before I get to that, let me just say I'm honored tonight to be joined by a couple of people that are going to be part of this panel. The first of whom is our Chief Investigator, Sean McCleskey, to my left. So Sean is, as I mentioned, our Chief Investigator. He comes to us after many years in law enforcement. He served as a special agent with the Secret Service, and then he retired and went to work with the Bexar County Sheriff's Office, with the sheriff here. So he certainly knows his way around preparing an offense report. He knows his way around reporting and investigating a crime. And so now he leads our investigative division, which has about 60 or so investigators. I say all the time that we are not an initiating investigative agency. That means that our investigators don't go out to crime scenes and gather witness statements and the like. They are trial division support, but they do a very important job at the leadership of Chief McCleskey. So we'll hear from him in a minute. I'm also honored to be joined by our Bexar County Sheriff. Javier Salazar has been a public servant for many years, and he has done a fantastic job running the Bexar County Sheriff's Office. He certainly has a lot of challenges that he handles well, one of which is the constant overcrowding at the jail that he and I talk about on a constant basis. So we'll hear from him about the work that he's doing in the Sheriff's Office. And so let's go ahead and begin. Christian's going to serve as our moderator, and we'll have questions for us. So I'm going to hand the microphone back over to him.
Thanks, Joe. So we have some questions prepared so that we can talk about some different topics, and then when we're done with those, if anybody here has questions, we'll open it up from there. So starting it off, can each of you, we'll start with Joe. Let's do Joe, Sheriff, Sean. Can each of you talk about initiatives you're implementing to improve public safety?
Sure. Well, again, when we first came into office 4 years ago, we knew that we had some challenges. We knew that we had to tackle on the average of about 50 to 60,000 cases that we handle in our office. We have a staff of over 500. When we're fully staffed, we have about 250 or so prosecutors. But the office could not run as efficiently as it does without the leadership of our various division chiefs, some of which you see here today. They are very dedicated public servants. They work very hard at what they do because they believe in fighting for the victims of crime. But talking about public service, public safety, the first thing we need to do is recognize that we have to identify why we have crime and why we have an increase in crime. And we can talk about all the factors, but I think it's pretty much established that crime is caused or can be caused by divestment in the community. It could have economic factors, the fact that people may not have jobs, may not have opportunities, may not be able to advance themselves. Obviously, being homeless is a challenge. So there may be several factors that contribute to crime, and certainly that can contribute to an increase in crime. For example, we know during the pandemic there were a lot of stressors that people went through. People faced challenges of losing their jobs, not being able to feed their family, not be able to keep their homes warm. And so that can contribute to an increase in crime. But when I took office, I realized that we needed to do more than what was being done in prior administrations. Because what was being done before was cases were being filed, you went to court to prosecute an individual for crime that may or may not include jail time if it was a misdemeanor. It may or may not have included prison time if it was a felony offense. But then you had the issue of recidivism, that is the tendency to reoffend. And so we had to look at what we could do different to reduce the level of recidivism. And what we saw, because we did some research across the country, what we learned is that diversionary programs actually help reduce the amount of recidivism. Typically, when someone goes through the court process from the very beginning to the very end, they tend to reoffend at a rate of about 38%. However, when you give them the opportunity to participate in diversionary programs, they can then reoffend at less than that. We, for example, have numbers now in Bexar County to show that the rate of recidivism has been dropped to 8 and 9% with felony and misdemeanor cases that we've handled. And certainly one of the best examples of that is a program that is what I call all the time a law enforcement tool, because the reason that we have a program called Cite and Release is because law enforcement, along with this office from the very beginning of our administration, worked together to initiate that program. And certainly the sheriff is one that believes in what we're doing. But it's not something that I just came up with. I didn't just come in here one day and decide, hey, you know what, let's begin Cite and Release. That is something that was enacted by the legislature. So it is a law that is on the books that allows us to divert people that are detained by law enforcement. And so in a minute I'm going to talk about how it actually works, but I wanted to mention that is one way of trying to tackle an increase in crime. The other program that we've initiated recently, we have a division called the Conviction Integrity Unit. One of the things that they do is look at as the name implies, the integrity of a conviction to make sure that it's based on solid evidence, based on credible witnesses, and if there's anything that is improper about the prosecution of that case, then obviously we will consider any remedies that are appropriate. But they're also going out to the community to engage in programs to try and reduce the amount of recidivism that we see in our community. One of those programs is called A Second Chance for Success, where we've partnered with Haven for Hope. The idea is if we can somehow eliminate convictions that prevent people from housing, obviously we're talking about low-level nonviolent offenses. If we can do something to help them expunge their prior criminal histories and then qualify for housing and job opportunities, then we've done something different than just the revolving door of reincarcerating and putting them back in the system. Of course, any program like that is not something that should compromise the safety of the community. So that's an example of what we've done. So you may ask yourself, well, how does that impact public safety? Well, this is how that will contribute to a focus on public safety. If we can eliminate focusing on those kinds of crime by offering silent release and other diversionary program, then we can spend our time with more serious crimes like robberies and aggravated sexual assaults, other forms of sex crimes, murders, and the like. The kinds of crimes that the sheriff and I always talk about keeps us up at night. So that's an example of what we're doing to try and think outside the box and to do something that's different than the way that we perhaps have handled these kinds of crimes historically in district attorneys' offices before we got here. So what I'd like to do next is hand it to Chief McCleskey and ask him to talk about a specific part of initiatives that we have in the office, and that's protective orders. We have a division within the DA's office called the Family Justice Center that is run by our executive director. She's not here this evening, but Crystal Chandler runs that division, and her division is tasked with the responsibility of serving and processing protective orders, because a lot of times when someone is a victim of domestic violence, that victim cannot wait to get to court on a family violence misdemeanor case or other crimes that may be filed, but it needs immediate attention. And so one of the ways that we can serve an individual like that is by providing a protective order. But that involves having the investigators serve these protective orders. Oftentimes, that's a risky proposition. Many times they have to serve protective orders involving people that have significant criminal histories and have violent histories. So I want to pass it to Chief McCleskey to talk a little bit about the work that the FJC unit does with protective orders. So Chief.
Thank you very much. Good evening. For those who know me, to sit here and talk is going to be really hard. I like to get up and move around, so if I start fidgeting, that's just because I don't like sitting while I'm talking. So, as the DA was saying, that the FJC in the protective order unit is a very new function for us at the DA's office, and I'll kind of backtrack a little bit. Most people don't know that the DA's office does in fact have investigators. I often ask, what do you guys do? Well, principally, we are peace officers. There's 64 of us, 63 full-time, 1 reserve officer, and our primary mission is to go out and assist the attorneys in the prosecution of a case. And that's generally, we go out and find, we serve subpoenas, we make sure witnesses are available and they come into court. We also are going out and looking at, we sit down with them, we look at the case, we see if there's anything else that additionally needs to be done. They may send us out to do that, or we stay in contact with the law enforcement agencies to make sure we're getting everything we need to successfully prosecute that case. One of the things that was a change for us is we were tasked to go out and serve these high-risk protective orders. And I say high risk, they've been deemed that there's a certain level of dangerousness and immediacy to serving these protective orders. So we started with one investigator. The commissioners got together and decided we needed additional support. So we have now a total of 3 investigators who are out on a daily basis, again, serving these high-risk protective orders. And I want to be very clear that these folks, these DA investigators, are out in harm's way every single day, that they are out there trying to protect this community through this process. A lot of times what we've seen is these individuals that we're out there to try to serve the protective order, and what we have seen is there's a number of these individuals that often have felony warrants. So obviously if we're there, we're going to have to serve the protective order, but we're also going to have to serve the felony warrants. There's been a number of occasions these individuals have been armed and extremely violent criminal backgrounds, as a matter of fact. So just to kind of give you an idea, since January 2021, we have served approximately 877 of those protective orders. And during that process, we have cleared about 300 plus active warrants that were out there. And that's DA people. We've had a lot of assistance from other law enforcement that show up and provide, backup for lack of a better term. And some of the folks, some of the DA investigators that are here tonight serve on that unit or assist the FJC unit. I myself went out the other day and we had to go search for somebody who had a high-risk protective order. Again, he also had a warrant for aggravated assault with a deadly weapon. So again, these are very violent individuals typically, and we're out there to make sure we get that protective order served, and then if they have a warrant, to serve that as well. So we've spent, just to kind of give you an idea, it's taken about 1,600 hours of surveillance to try to locate these individuals. So it's not like we just roll out and we find them right there. It takes a lot of time and effort for our people to be out there. Surprise, a number of these people don't want to be found, so we have to go out and search multiple addresses, catch them at different hours of the night. And it is not unheard of that our folks are out very, very late at night or very early in the morning trying to accomplish this mission. And so, again, like I said, these folks are in harm's way on a daily basis out here serving the community. I just want people to understand that is what DA investigators to some degree are doing.
Thank you, Chief, and thank you for what you do. And we do recognize how dangerous your job is and the other investigators. So we thank you for that. I'd like to pass over the microphone out to the sheriff. And Sheriff, what I'd like you to do is talk a little bit about your philosophy, talk a little bit about how your office handles public safety. I know you have a lot of challenges, manpower being one of them, just like we have that very challenge. But talk about how you handle public safety with the amount of officers or deputies that you have. And then I'd like to specifically ask you to address the jail population and the issues of overcrowding and how significant that is to you.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Mr. DA. So with regard to the Sheriff's Office, we actually operate a full-service law enforcement agency. The jail is a big, huge part of what we do. Running security for the court system is a big, huge part of what we do. But then we also run a full-service police department, aside from that services all 2.2 million Bexar County residents, 1,200 square miles. We are responsible for that. Now, naturally, we concentrate most of our efforts on the unincorporated areas, in other words, the donut around San Antonio. But we are known to cross over into city limits sometimes to handle calls for service or anything that our deputies might witness firsthand. Certainly, if we're serving felony warrants, our fugitive apprehension unit is out serving felony warrants. They go anywhere within the county. We will also help out smaller municipalities that don't necessarily have the capabilities to handle a large crime scene or a large crash. We have investigative units that will help them supplement whatever it is that they might have. So it's definitely a 3 full-time jobs wrapped up into one. Now, on the law enforcement side of the house, we have a multifaceted, multi-pronged approach. We've obviously got patrol. That's where the rubber hits the road as far as law enforcement goes. They're out proactively handling calls for service on a reactive basis. We've also got a pretty vigorous organized crime group that is relatively small in comparison to some of the other larger agencies in the state. I've only got fewer than 50 people in my organized crime group, but I would absolutely put them up against any organized crime group from any other large law enforcement agency in the state. They do great work because they concentrate a lot on not just getting the bad guys off the street, not just getting the guns and the dope off the street, but putting together a quality case to allow them to follow up on it and send these folks where they need to be, off to prison. A lot of it hinges on the quality of that case from the onset. If it's trash going in, it's going to be trash coming out, and there's only so much that even the best prosecutor can do if the report and the probable cause is trash. And so our deputies spend a lot of time seeing things through, or doing what they need to do so that these folks can see things through on the other end, and they're very, very good at that. With that being said, that's our proactive, strong presence in law enforcement. They're working with violent crimes task forces from other units, or from other agencies, SAPD, DPS. But we've also got a softer approach to law enforcement as well, our SCORE unit. SCORE stands for Sheriff's Community-Oriented Response and Education. So for those of you that are familiar with the San Antonio Police Department SAFE unit, well, SCORE is the Bexar County equivalent of that. Those are the community policing folks that are out doing community organizing. They're out doing homeowners associations. They're teaching Cellular on Patrol. They're teaching active shooter preparation, stop the bleed preparation, human trafficking classes that they do. Anything that proactively teaches the community how to prevent crime from happening in the first place, those are the folks that do that as well. And so I could go on and on about the law enforcement side of the house, but as the DA mentioned, he wanted me to mention our jail. So our jail, just to give you some perspective on it, at any given time has about over 4,000 inmates in it. Right now we're sitting at about 4,600 inmates that are in the Bexar County Jail. They are there for the whole gamut of what you can possibly be arrested for, from the very minor, although he and I work very, very hard to try to minimize that and find other ways of handling that. And then there's some people that are there simply because they're dangerous folks, and they're there for very, very serious crimes, multiple murders, aggravated sexual assaults against children, human trafficking, just any number of violent crimes that folks are locked up for. Now, with that being said, I've got a certain philosophy on jails, because as much as if budget was no matter, if money was no object, then of course, yeah, lock them all up and throw away the key. Well, it's a jail, not a prison. It's a different part of the process. So most of the people in our jail are actually, you've heard the term innocent until proven guilty. Because of the stage of the process that they're at, they're presumed to be innocent until they haven't been proven guilty yet. And so, with that being said, it's a full-time gig. I've got at full strength about 900 deputies that work inside the jail to manage those 4,600 inmates. But we've got to be selective as a system, right? Not just in Bexar County, as a system, we've got to be selective of who spends time in jail. Because it's such an expensive endeavor. It's a big, huge chunk of every county's budget, not just ours. And so, jails are for people that society is afraid of. At least that's who should be in a jail. People that society is afraid of, because they're just way too dangerous to walk amongst us. Jails are not for people that are there simply because they can't afford to not be. And if you don't believe me on that, there are absolutely people that have found their way into the jail system for a relatively minor infraction. And because they don't have two dimes to rub together, they can't get out. But meanwhile, the way our system is set up, somebody can literally murder a child, and if they've got the money to buy their way out of jail, they're out of jail the next day. And so, fair, unfair, I don't know what it is. It's the system overall that we deal with in this country isn't necessarily the fairest, but it's the system we've got to work within. Granted, of course, our DA's office does a great job at helping us to navigate that. So again, jails are not for people that are there simply because they can't afford to not be. Jails are also not for the mentally ill. And unfortunately, in the state of Texas, over the years, the state of Texas has just done a horrible job at building mental health beds. We just simply don't have enough of them. So what we're left with is a bunch of jails that are de facto mental health hospitals. You're taking people that the judge has, we've got our fair share. We've got a couple hundred in our jail right now that a judge has already said, this person is incompetent to stand trial. They should be in a hospital somewhere. They don't need badges and guns guarding them. They need doctors and nurses. But there is no hospital with doctors and nurses to send them to, so they're stuck in the jail. And from a taxpayer perspective, it's not a good use of taxpayer dollars to keep them locked up in the jail, racking up overtime, decompensating at the same time. From a human rights perspective, it's an absolute abomination. But again, because of the way the state of Texas is set up, that's what we're stuck with, is people that are in jail for a mental health issue or an addiction, which is also a disease, and there's nowhere else to send them, so they're stuck in jail. The third category of people that just absolutely don't belong in a jail are those that we're mad at, right? Jails are for people that are dangerous, not people that we're simply mad at because they did something dumb. All right, think about a 19-year-old kid that's out doing what 19-year-old kids do sometimes and getting themselves into trouble for something silly. And you know, a 19-year-old that may get caught with, say, a dime bag of weed. Well, as dumb as that is, and as a parent, you're mad at that kid, but do they belong in jail for a long period of time? Granted, yes, they're going to take the ride and they're going to be scared and hopefully they'll change their ways, but do you really want to lock them away in jail for a long period of time to teach them that lesson? I just think that there's much better ways of teaching that lesson without locking them away, giving them a criminal record, making it harder for them to find gainful employment later on down the line. It creates more problems than what it's worth. So for what it's worth, that's my philosophy on the jail process.
Yeah, and it's a philosophy that makes sense. And what you point out is we do need to focus on the individuals that are harming this community, that are at risk of reoffending. And so you're absolutely right. You know what I say all the time, because I have relationships with other elected DAs across the state and actually across the country. And I'm very fortunate that I have a working relationship with Sheriff Salazar. He understands my philosophy. He understands why we brought criminal justice reform to Bexar County, and he understands why we have initiated the kind of programs that we've had on the low-level nonviolent offenses, so that we can do an effective job prosecuting those very serious crimes. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to hand the mic back to Christian, because I think he's got a question or a second topic that he would like for us to cover.
I know we've hit on this a little bit already, but can you explain what site release is, what that program is, and what diversion is, and how it works within our various offices?
Sure, and you may be wondering, well, why are we even talking about that? Why are you focusing on site and release and not talking about violent crime? Well, we are going to talk about violent crime in a minute, but one of the reasons that we can focus on effectively prosecuting violent crime is because of programs like site and release. But one of the things that I have learned since being your elected DA is that there's a lot of confusion in the community about exactly what we do. There's a lot of misunderstanding about our role. There's a lot of misunderstanding about our function in different processes. For example, how someone bonds out. But with regard to site and release, we actually have various dashboards on our website so that you can go on and learn about how we run this office, and we have a site and release dashboard. If you have access to a computer, you can go on to bear.org/DA, and you can actually read and learn about all the cases that we handled. We've got, as I mentioned, one on site and release. We've got one on family violence. We've got one on the criminal trial division. We've got one on intake. And so you can have a better understanding of what we do. But back to site and release. So the confusion, for example, is how it works. I've heard the term catch and release, which implies that members of law enforcement arrest those individuals, bring them to the magistrate's office, and then at that point we release them. That's not how this works. The only way that site and release works in Bexar County is that the officers have the absolute discretion to make the decision not to arrest an individual. And so it's a law enforcement tool in the sense that they're making the decision every day out in the field. when a member of law enforcement, for example, encounters someone that they pull over in a traffic stop, let's say the driver rolls down the window and smells a strong odor of marijuana. Historically, what would happen was you only had one option, which is place that person in cuffs, make the arrest, process that person, take them down in the magistrate's office. It may take you an entire shift to process that individual, because you have to bring them in, you have to fill out the police report, you have to see him get processed, and as I mentioned, it may take an entire shift. What cite and release allows is, if the officer makes the decision to cite that individual, then there is no arrest. He simply issues a citation and gets back on patrol to respond to your more serious crime. Maybe he's responding to a burglary of the vehicle. Maybe he's responding to a break-in of your home. Maybe he's responding to you being held up at the local convenience store. And so there is benefit to law enforcement in that it puts them back on patrol. There is benefit to the individual because that person avoids the collateral consequences of an arrest. Because we know that, for example, even an arrest may keep you from getting a good job. It may cause you to lose public assistance. It may cause you to lose financial aid if you're a college student. So it avoids the collateral consequences. But more than that, it gives the person the opportunity to have an alternative to incarceration. And perhaps a conviction, because instead of going to court, instead of having to wait for their day in court, they are asked to go to a reentry center. They're asked to, first of all, we will screen them to see if they're even eligible for cite and release. And then we'll ask them to do either some community service or do a drug awareness class or shoplifting class, if that's the offense for which they've been cited. And if they successfully complete that, then they avoid going to court. So you may ask, well, why do that? Well, again, as I mentioned before, it's all about trying to reduce the crime in our community. It's all about trying to reduce recidivism. We now know, because we have the numbers, that this has been a huge success because of members of law enforcement, like the sheriff, that have participated. In 3 years, 6,200 people have avoided being arrested. That means 6,200 people that didn't get arrested, that didn't have to bond out in jail if they could, and didn't have to go to court. It has saved the county $4.7 million. So that's close to $5 million that the county didn't have to spend on booking that individual and potentially housing that person, and let alone the cost that it takes to appoint a court-appointed lawyer, all that taxpayers' cost. So that's a benefit to the county in that respect. But more importantly, we now know that the level of recidivism is lower than if that person had gone to court. We know that the level of recidivism for someone who successfully completes cite and release is 7.9%. So again, it's a program that works, and it allows us to focus on violent crime. It allows the officer to get back on the street and respond to those kinds of calls that are important to you and to me. Sheriff, can you add to that? I mean, what is your perspective about cite and release and how it works in your agency?
I mean, I'm in favor of cite and release. What I like about it the most is that the deputies ultimately have the discretion. They can use it or they cannot use it. If they choose to arrest that suspect because of A, B, or C, maybe they're a hardened gang member, or they've already had a violent past, I doubt that writing them a ticket and letting them go is gonna have the deterrent effect. But it's all in the hands of the deputies themselves. I don't remove that discretion from them. The DA certainly doesn't remove that discretion from them. And in fact, from the onset of this, the DA has always told us, stress to your deputies that still search that car, make that arrest if it comes down to it. Make the arrest, and we'll handle it if it comes down to it. But the discretion is absolutely in the hands of that first responder, where it should be.
Okay, Christian, I'm going to hand it back to you for the next topic.
Okay, so I want us to have time for audience questions, so I'm going to try to go through these a little quicker. We can do like 2-minute answers,
okay.
3-minute answers. So if you can tell us a little bit specifically about what y'all are doing about violent crime.
Well, again, because of the diversionary programs, we're able to focus on violent crime. We know that there's been an increase in violent crime, but that's been around the country. That's not just a Bexar County problem or a state problem. We know, for example, there's been an increase in homicides, but I will tell you that there's been a decrease in other sorts of crimes. For example, violent crime went down by 9% in other areas other than homicides. Sexual assaults and robberies have gone down 22%. But any increase in crime and violent crime is not good, right? So we need to focus on that. What we've done is we've undergone measures to focus on that, like, for example, in our domestic violence arena. In the family violence unit, we have increased the number of prosecutors from 23 to now 46. We've improved the way that we process the intake. We make decisions a lot sooner. We try and do it within 72 hours. We reach out to the victims of domestic violence within 72 hours. We try and make decisions about filing those cases within about a week. Before we came into office, the administration before us took longer periods of time. And we're also focusing on gun violence. We are focusing on the kinds of crimes involving guns. I recently initiated a policy of moving to destroy weapons in connection with a successful prosecution of a crime. So if you bring a gun to a crime, you commit a crime, and we prosecute you, we're going to move to destroy that weapon so that it is removed from the stream of commerce so that nobody else can use that gun to inflict any kind of harm in the future. So again, by allowing the refocus, we are prioritizing our efforts on violent crime, on gun violence, on domestic violence, in order to continue to keep our community safe. Sure.
Absolutely. Well, we've already talked about what we're doing out on the streets, but in the jail, we've actually got a variety of jail programs designed to help inmates teach their behavior while they're there. Obviously, they're going to have to want to be a part of this, and look, if you're dealing with Hannibal Lecter that'll eat your face, then no jail program is going to teach him not to eat people's faces, right? So that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about the person that's tired of being in that life or learned their lesson after the first or second or third arrest and says, you know what, something's got to change. I need to learn a job skill. I don't even know how to tie a tie to go to a job interview. If I could just learn how to do that, I promise you I'll never come back. And guess what? We do teach them those things in the jail. Things that'll teach them a trade, teach them a skill, teach them the right way to go out and make money, teach them the right way to go out and approach a job interview. So in the hopes that I never see them again. And so the programs work, and the best part about all of our jail programs that help with domestic violence, they help with drug addictions, they help with folks even that want to do some faith-based things while they're there in the jail or learning job skills. They come at no cost to taxpayers. Those are actually funded by commissary funds within the jail setting. So they're all self-funded by the inmates themselves in the commissary process. But again, we go on all night about it, but I know that we're pressed for time.
Let me just say that combating violent crime is not just a DA function. It takes a lot of partners. It takes everybody working together. And I want to mention that, for example, Bexar County and San Antonio have put some excellent evidence-based community violence in prevention programs. The city of San Antonio, for example, has prioritized a research-based public health approach to violence prevention and established the Metro Health Violence Prevention section. So again, it takes a village, as a phrase says, and we have to work together to combat violence.
I'm just going to read one more question so that we can get to the audience. How do you think the Dobbs decision and Texas's commitment to banning abortions could impact public safety?
Well, we had Roe v. Wade for about 50 years, and it was, I thought, pretty well settled law that a woman had a right to make decisions about her own body. But we now have what amounts to a total ban on abortion, a total ban on a woman's right to make those personal decisions. But that's not going to stop that from happening. Unfortunately, what's going to happen is women are still going to seek that remedy. They're still going to do that, but now it's going to be less safe. Unfortunately, what may happen is we may revert back to what we heard happened in the 60s and 50s, the backdoor coat hanger atrocities, and that's outrageous. But the reality is that is something that will impact public safety. I've said all along, I understand my obligation to review cases if and when they're filed by law enforcement, but I don't see the justice in prosecuting someone who makes a decision like that. That's very personal. So only time will tell how it impacts public safety, but I'm afraid that it's going to cause some women to end up with serious consequences. Do you want the sheriff to comment on that?
Or you want? It's up to you. Okay. Sure. I mean, I've got my own opinion on it, and put it out there publicly a while back and took my lumps for it for sure. But I certainly don't mind. I'd do it again in a heartbeat. So look, as the dad of two young ladies, my daughters are 21 and 28. As their dad, it's I can give my opinion on the decisions that they make with their own bodies if they ask me for it. But at the end of the day, it's their decision to make. As their sheriff, it's none of my business. It shouldn't be. I don't need another excuse for young women, or another reason for young women to be more afraid of law enforcement than they are of these backdoor amateur doctors that are going to put them in harm's way just for the sake of helping them deal with this situation. So certainly not in favor of the decision, and I hope to see things get back to the way they were under Roe soon.
Thank you, Sheriff. I know it's about 7 or 8 minutes to 7, and I know we want to be mindful of people's time. So I think I'm going to hand it back to you, Christian. And
thanks very much for y'all being here, and hopefully we'll be able to do this again.